In 1887, Fabergé opened their branch in Moscow. Then followed Odessa, London, and Kiev. At the height of business, the house employed more than 500 people. The Moscow branch was a triumph. The store had one workshop dedicated to silverware and another to jewelry. The company catered to a different clientele than that of St. Petersburg. The Moscow bourgeoisie was much more attached to traditional Russian culture. Franz Bierbaum noted,
"The first thing that distinguishes Moscow Fabergé articles from St. Petersburg ones is the predominance of the Russian national style.
The Moscow and St. Petersburg workshops produced sumptuous pieces in silver. Muscovite designers also created objects decorated with richly decorated cloisonné enamel. The romantic scenes were often reproductions of works by famous artists. At the turn of the 20th century, the Russian style began to adopt elements from Art Nouveau. To meet the demand, Fabergé decided to rationalize the house's production methods. On Bolshaya Morskaya Street, he constructed a vast building in pink-gray granite, inaugurated in 1900. It allowed him to gather under one roof the majority of his workshops and craftsmen, until then spread all over St. Petersburg. Grand dukes and duchesses loved to visit and would spend hours choosing their objects. The advent of the 20th century and the World's Fair in Paris marked the peak of Fabergé's career. In the Russian pavilion, Fabergé was allocated one display case. It was a total triumph. He was awarded a gold medal and decorated with the Legion of Honor, the highest distinction of the French Republic. To celebrate the new century and the years ahead, Fabergé designed for the Empress Maria, Nicholas II's mother, a particularly elegant egg clock in the Regency style, the cockerel egg. The round clock is coated in white enamel. The numbers on the face are studded with diamonds. The arrow-shaped hands are in gold filigree. The clock face is crowned with laurel wreaths studded with pearls and diamonds. A fairly large trellis with acorns is completed by garlands of hanging fruits and berries. The surprise is a crowing cockerel. The lid opens and it appears from the top of the egg. In 1904, Fabergé delivered to Alexander Kelch another egg called the Chantecler, heavily inspired by the cockerel egg. (1904 and 1905 were dark years for the imperial family. On February 8, 1904, Japanese torpedo boats attacked the Russian fleet anchored at Port Arthur. The ensuing war saw 2 million men clash. The conflict would end on September 5, 1905, with Russian defeat. During the 2 years that the war lasted, the ritual of Imperial Easter eggs was suspended. These years grew darker still for the Romanovs. Revolt began to brew among the peasants, as life in the countryside was frequently hit by famine. And in the cities, the workers began to organize mass strikes. The first uprising broke out in St. Petersburg on January 9, 1905. Nicholas II was forced to agree to a constitution guaranteeing basic freedoms and an elected parliament, the Duma. In 1913, the Tsar launched festivities to mark the 300th year of Romanov rule in Russia. Fabergé was honored with his biggest ever official commission. This sumptuous occasion was the last before the apocalypse. In August 1914, World War I broke out. Through a combination of alliances and treaties, Russia was plunged into the conflict. The Russian army quickly suffered huge human losses. The Tsar headed to the front to take charge of his men. Despite his personal involvement, Russian troops were forced into a retreat that proved catastrophic. The Fabergé workers left for war. Women took their places at the workbenches to make equipment and munitions for the Russian army. Among other supplies, they delivered 2 million bullets. But the tradition of Easter gifts continued, and the egg offered to Maria Feodorovna in 1916 was a reference to military glory. The Order of St. George egg is extremely sober. The ivory color enamel shell is dotted with crosses, which seem to rise from the mist. It's adorned with a ribbon and 2 medallions representing the cross and the medal of St. George. These can be lifted to reveal the portraits of Maria Feodorovna's son and grandson. The egg is of great beauty in its simplicity. In keeping with the austerity of the time, it's not brimming over with gold or precious stones. In 1917, revolution broke out. Soldiers lined up alongside the insurgents. The army abandoned the Tsar, who was forced to abdicate. In October, revolutionary forces seized power. On July 17, 1918, the imperial family was summarily executed. The man who had sowed so many precious stones on the Romanovs' path disappeared with them. Karl Fabergé left Russia for Lausanne in Switzerland, where he died soon after in early fall 1920. He was buried in Caen, in the French soil from which his ancestors had been forced to flee 2 centuries earlier. In Russia, the fledgling Soviet power, in need of gold and foreign currency, sold off the imperial treasures. Fabergé objects were dismounted to retrieve the gold and precious stones. Tens of thousands of the jeweler's works also left in the suitcases of Russians fleeing into exile, who tried to survive by selling precious objects. A market would open up for these jewels, which drew high media interest.
Tragic irony attaches to this collection of treasures now being offered for sale in New York, for these were the gifts of the last Tsar of Russia to his Tsarina.
The American billionaire Malcolm Forbes, in a race in the form of an ideological conflict, wanted to own more Fabergé eggs than the Kremlin.
It's always fun to beat the Kremlin in a competition if it's not nuclear.
In 2004, Malcolm Forbes' heirs put the collection up for sale. Before the auction, the Russian businessman Viktor Vekselberg managed to acquire the entire collection. His Link of Times Foundation bought scattered works to bring them back to their country of origin. These days, the Fabergé Museum, housed in the Shuvalov Palace in St. Petersburg, offers visitors a sumptuous collection of more than 1,000 pieces. But this epic tale doesn't end there. A drawing exists of a final planned Fabergé egg, destined for the Tsarina Alexandra in 1917. It was never finished due to the fall of the empire, but a few important elements of this egg were found in the Mineralogy Museum in Moscow. The egg is in midnight blue. The constellations of the day of the Tsarevich Alexis's birth are engraved on the dome. It seems to suggest that the fate of the young heir to the throne was already written in the heavens on the day he was born. The egg rests on opaque rock crystal clouds. The initial drawing planned for the presence of cherubs in silver. This prophetic work is all the more moving as it is incomplete.
Oh.